Hello. It's been a rocky day for the region's economy, buffeted by labour disputes and hit by another big jump in the jobless figures.
Let's start with the Royal Mail. Millions of letters across the country piling up and waiting to be delivered. 500,000 of those in Peterborough. Nearly 4 months into the dispute, it appears to be getting worse, not better. We'll hear from the company in a moment. But first to Chelmsford and Felicity Simper.
Well, the strike here at the distribution centre in Chelmsford was one of just several today. They also walked out in Northampton and Peterborough. Now, members of the Communication Workers Union are really digging in their heels about their working terms and conditions. It's a complex row, but one example is in some places they want to replace bicycle and walking routes with vans, which obviously impacts on the way people work. Now, this dispute's been going on since June, and the strikes are starting to affect not just households, but also businesses.
The picket line in Chelmsford earlier today. These are just some of around 90 drivers and distribution staff who are on strike. They say the way they're being treated by Royal Mail is so bad it's impacting on their personal lives.
The process that's been followed by Royal Mail is that they've picked people's names out of a hat and assigned people to duties without their agreement. So effectively we've had people that have moved from days to nights, and these have affected people's earnings, people's families. We've got, at the moment, 10% of our staff are off sick. And
this strike is just one of a series by 20,000 members of the Communication Workers Union.
The last national postal strikes were in 2007. They ended when the CWU and Royal Mail drew up the pay and modernisation agreement. But now members of the CWU are accusing Royal Mail of breaking that agreement by changing people's working patterns without properly consulting them.
And now businesses are starting to feel the effects. This mail order company in Southend supplies food supplements, and they rely on Royal Mail to send out around 50 parcels a day.
Well, we have people that aren't receiving their mail. We've got one lady, a young woman in southwest London, who is absolutely dependent on a particular enzyme. If she doesn't get the enzyme, she can't eat. Just imagine that. And her parcel is stuck in the 20 million or so parcels that are in London.
The companies say they've lost around £1,000 in revenue because of the strikes, and they're worried about the future should the disputes continue.
Well, the CWU say that there are no strikes planned for tomorrow, and in fact they're actually expected to tail off over the next few weeks as the ballot for national strike action goes ahead. Back to you.
Felicity, thank you very much. Well, earlier today we spoke to a representative of the union at the TUC conference in Liverpool. That person told us there'd been meetings with the company, but said they weren't negotiations, they were lectures. When I spoke to Rob Jensen from Royal Mail, I asked him if that was true.
Well, you know, they are very detailed meetings addressing some very difficult challenges that the business faces. But, you know, it's easy to say they're lectures. What we have to accept and understand is that the challenges exist. We are losing around 10% year on year in terms of volume decline. We cannot just bury our head in the sand and ignore that situation.
Are you prepared to negotiate with the unions, or are you telling them that this is a done deal and they have to accept it?
Well, there is no done deal. We're having conversations about how we address the challenges that face the company. Clearly, those discussions are made much more difficult when we are having strikes on a regular basis. We're faced with the threat of a national strike, with a ballot that is underway. You know, the sensible thing to do, the responsible thing to do, is to call those strikes off and focus our energies and focus the union to focus energies in finding a solution to these difficulties.
But the union did offer you a moratorium on the strikes while you discussed what would happen in the future, and you said no to it.
Well, what the union actually said to the business was, stop changing, stop all that you are doing to address the challenges that face this organisation, and we'll cancel strikes. Well, that is a ridiculous situation. They simply do not want change. That is the truth of the matter. They claim to support modernisation, but the reality of their actions is a complete contradiction to that.
But didn't they say to you, we will stop the strike action if you will negotiate, and you won't negotiate?
Well, we are in conversations with the CWU. As I've just said, 70 meetings to date already, and even yesterday, continued meetings and discussions with the union to find a solution. So why do they continue to strike?
Are you prepared to bend in any way?
Well, as I've said a few times, these conversations are taking place. What we want to do is find a solution to these problems, but most importantly, deliver the changes that need to be made in the organisation to ensure our future success, and that has to be in the interest of every single individual that works for this company.
I'm sorry to ask you the same question again, but you say you're having conversations. I ask you if you are prepared to bend in any way. Are you prepared to move in any way towards the unions to meet them in some kind of agreement?
Well, I mean, I think of course we are. What I'm trying to say in terms of the conversations, they are open conversations. There are some very complex issues facing the organisation, and what we want to do is to find a path through that which we can therefore jointly accept and most importantly, therefore, as I've said, deliver the changes that need to be made in the organisation. But what we can't do is have a situation whereby the only solution that the CWU or the union wants is one of no change.
So you say they have to go back to work and call off their strike action, and then you will discuss something. They say, well, we will do that if you promise to discuss it. I don't see where the problem is. Why don't you sit down? Can't you sort it out? Can't you say, let's have the 3-month moratorium?
Well, I actually wholeheartedly agree with you. We are in discussions, essentially, as we speak with the CWU, so why do they continue to strike?
And as far as you're concerned, those are talks and not lectures.
They are not lectures, but we've got to be grown up and accept the reality of the situation we find ourselves in as a company, and then have very sensible discussions about how we resolve them. To do nothing is not an option.
Mr. Jensen, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
From post to rail, and let's start with the good news. Next week's train strike on the East Anglia line is off. But the state of the region's railways came under fire today from delegates at the TUC's annual conference in Liverpool. Speakers called for the East Coast Main Line to be nationalised and for National Express to be stripped of its East Anglia franchise.
Next week's strike would have been a nightmare for passengers and highly damaging for National Express, which is why both sides have been working hard behind the scenes. This evening, confirmation that the strike is off.
I believe it was both sides working together to avoid taking any further strike action, which basically neither side really wanted to happen.
But the union is still angry with National Express, and it's all to do with the way the East Coast Main Line was run. One of the most important routes in the country, the franchise is to be taken away from the company after it ran up heavy losses on the route. Today at the TUC conference, a critical and unanimous vote.
We urge the government to strip National Express of the remaining C2C and East Anglia franchises. Defaulting on one should mean defaulting on all. They shouldn't be able to keep those franchises which are profitable and while walking away from those that make a loss.
The company says it has no intention of giving up the other routes. The government is now looking for a new operator to take on the East Coast Main Line. The TUC says the best way forward for staff and commuters is to keep the route permanently nationalised. The dispute on National Express East Anglia is over for now, but it's clear there's no love lost between the two sides. Andrew Sinclair, BBC Look East.
And Andrew is here now. Royal Mail, National Express. I know it's autumn now, but are we heading for a winter of discontent again, do you think?
And to that list you could add London Midland, Fujitsu in Stevenage, the baggage handlers at Stansted, the firemen in Essex. There is a lot of anger over pay and conditions and jobs at the moment. It's inevitable, really, in a recession. But I think the anger is a bit stronger this time round because the government bailed out the banks, and that set a dangerous precedent because it now means that the unions can say to the government, you, a Labour government, bailed out the banks, why not bail out the post office, why not bail out the railways? Now, of course, the government say they bailed out the bank for the greater good, they can't go around bailing out everyone else, but it's a hard case to sell, and that's why we're seeing all this talk of strikes at the moment.
And presumably ministers are very concerned about all of this, aren't they?
They say they're not that concerned. They believe that common sense will prevail and people will realise that at a time like this, the last thing you want is a strike because it damages a company. But, to answer your earlier question, in the back of everyone's minds is 1978. Then the economy was in a mess. Then the Prime Minister didn't call an early election and we had the winter of discontent and Labour was soundly beaten. We're not there yet, but it's what everyone's worried about.
Andrew, thank you very much.